So good to see you all. Our opening words today, and just to say a little bit about the talk, the nonviolent third way of Jesus of Nazareth. I'm excited to share this talk. I had it scheduled a few months back, but we got snowed out, and so we're back to it today. This is an opening affirmation called "Love is Our Greatest Purpose." It's by J. Abernathy. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life. Okay, and the reading for today is from Mother Teresa. This poem or this exhortation was found written on her wall in Calcutta. She says, "People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give the best you have, and it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. In the final analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway." Mother Teresa. Today, we have a topic on the nonviolent third way of Jesus. And I want to read this scripture from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus is talking. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. Well, okay then. When you hear turn the other cheek, what do you think? Weak. What else? Doormat. What else? Anything else? Unreal.
Impractical.
Practical?
Impractical.
Yeah. I remember. What's that? Masochist. Yeah.
We're fearful.
Fearful. What else?
Red-faced.
Red-faced. Yeah, because it's got slow. Yeah. Well, I wanted to dig into this because, these texts, far from being invitations to be a doormat, are really acts of defiance. And I want to unpack that for us today. I want to start out by remembering the story of little Johnny. Little Johnny was a regular churchgoer. He didn't have a lot of patience. And each Sunday he and his sister would be invited to come down to the front of the church for the children's sermon. You've seen that before, right? On this particular Sunday, the pastor had planned to talk about St. Francis and the beauty of creation. And so he asked the children, "Can you tell me the name of a small, furry, brown creature that likes nuts, has a big bushy tail, and jumps from tree limb to tree limb?" What do you think it is?
Squirrel.
A squirrel, yeah. Well, little Johnny piped up, "Well, it sure sounds like a squirrel, but I'm going to say Jesus so we can get on with it." So I'm not going to talk about a squirrel today, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the sayings of Jesus. And my most accessible way to get into this talk is kind of with glimpses of autobiography rather than delivering to you some massive theological lecture that I'd get lost in anyway. My favorite professor in college, at Wofford College, I graduated from Wofford, was a guy named Charlie Barrett. He was a Methodist pastor, and he was the professor of theology. He died maybe a little over a year ago, and I have to say one of my regrets is that I didn't reconnect with him as I intended to. But I always was thinking, well, I have time, I'll get around to it, I have time. But I didn't. Just as an aside this morning, if there's something that you have in your heart that you want to do, and you're seduced by the myth that we have time, take another look at it. As one of my Buddhist buddies always want to say with a smile on his face, "It's later than you think." How's that for a wake-up call? Well, thankfully for you and for me, that's not the gist of the sermon today. But anyway, I took every class that Dr. Barrett offered. I can't call him Charlie. I was a student, And he got his PhD at Drew University up in New Jersey, where he specialized his research, his doctoral dissertation, on the work of an early to mid-20th century German New Testament theologian called Rudolf Bultmann. I remember hearing in seminary later, hearing one professor talking about Bultmann in class, and Bultmann rocked the world of New Testament studies. I'll just give you a heads up on that. And I remember one of my classmates scratching his head after class as we went out. He said, "Well, I don't know Bultmann from the milkman, but I know I love Jesus." You never know, right? Bultmann's great objective was to demythologize the Bible, the New Testament. And so following that idea, he made a distinction between the Jesus of history and the Christ of faith. So I want to kind of dive in on the Jesus of history today just a little bit, which is much more amenable to horizontally focused spiritualities like Unitarian Universalism rather than the vertical stuff that can carry with it a lot of dogma. There's a saying of Bultmann's that haunted me, and here's the autobiographical piece. He said that we cannot use electric lights and radios, and in the event of illness, avail ourselves of modern medical and clinical means, and at the same time, believe in the spirit and wonder world of the New Testament. So all these passages about demons and casting out spirits and all, he called all that into question. So this idea kind of haunted me for a while. What does it mean to believe in the New Testament then? I grew up in the Baptist church. I became an Episcopalian. What does it mean to take the Bible seriously, but not literally? That question provoked, that saying provoked a lot of these questions for me. And so I was primed for the work of another New Testament scholar years later named Walter Wink, also of blessed memory. He died in 2012. He had a different approach to understanding the Bible. He used Jungian archetypal understandings and the insights of contemporary psychology. And when he did that, he reopened the biblical world for me. His seminal work is on something he calls the powers. If you, some of you remember from Sunday school, growing up, or in church, there's a reference by Paul the Apostle in the book of Ephesians. He refers to the powers and principalities of this world. So Wink applied himself to trying to understand the powers and principalities of this world. And he wrote a massive theological tome in 3 volumes, a trilogy on the powers, naming the powers, unmasking the powers, engaging the powers. He has like 3 or 4 other books with powers in the title too. He had a cottage industry going there. But it was a profound breakthrough for me and for a lot of theologians, because he looked at, the reality of the demonic in the world. And by that, I don't mean to say a little dude in a red jumpsuit with a pitchfork. I don't mean to say green goblins that hide around, behind your door and stuff like that. I don't mean to say, people are going to get you slain in the spirit or something like that. What I mean to say, and this is what Wink was keen to point out, is that there is the presence of the demonic in the world, and let me tell you where I've seen it. I see it in the powers of dominion, of greed, of hatred. I see it in the challenges of addiction. I see it in, mean-spiritedness. These are powers and principalities that rule this world. The militarism that's happening on the Ukrainian border right now is a power that we need to find a way to wrestle with. And so he opened the Bible back up for me in that way. The demonic powers of militarism, addictions, greed, in short, the kind of domination system where something will just dominate and take over is a system that oppresses, subjugates the weak in our communities. And why is this important? Was Lyndon spending time on this for? Well, I think it's important because, you know what, we need to take seriously what's going on in the world so that we can address it. What's one way to deal with hunger? Well, open a food bank and a number of other charities. But does that ultimately work? No. I mean, it's a Band-Aid, It helps people in the moment, but it lets us off the hook for challenging the domination system where plenty of people have more than enough to eat and other people don't have enough to eat. That inequality is the demonic presence. I think Wink would say that. But that's where I'm going with it. And so Wink talks about the nonviolent third way of Jesus. What does it mean to be a third way? Is that some kind of hybrid? Well, think of the fight or flight response. All right. If you're under stress, if someone's coming to attack you, what are your 2 most readily thoughts that come to your mind? First is, well, I'm going to run. I'm going to flee, flight. Or I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to fight back. Fight. So fight or flight. That's where our system seems to be evolutionarily wired. There's a third, the freeze response, but we'll leave that on the shelf for now. Fight or flight. In flight, we have submission, passivity, withdrawal, and surrender. So, for example, if someone attacks me and I'm in flight, I'm just going to either run away or I'm going to cover myself and allow the attacker to do whatever he is doing to me. Now, the second way of fight is revenge, armed revolt, retaliation, and violent rebellion. So in the example of a bully attacking me, if I fight back or seek revenge, I'm going to stand my ground. He's going to swing at me. I'm going to swing back at him. Or in matters of state, you foment violent rebellion, to take over at some point at a later time. So we understand these 2, right? The world's full of examples. Any examples come to mind for anyone else? Yeah. The world is full of examples of the fight or flight response to trauma. These are the 2 ways. But Wink says there's a third way. So let's look at that. I'm going to read the scripture again. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go the 2nd mile also. Jesus is making a reference in this eye for an eye comment. He's making a reference to the Old Testament idea in the book of Leviticus, the old form of justice, an eye for an eye. So if someone takes your son's eye, you take that person's son's eye. And it's equal, right? Yeah. But what did Gandhi say? There's a problem with that because an eye for an eye leaves all eyes blind. There's too much blindness already in the world. So how do we break that cycle? How do we stop that? Jesus' third way, his nonviolent way of defiance and protest, I think, is something to consider. So do not resist an evildoer. That doesn't mean to give in, and it doesn't mean don't retaliate. He tells us what to do in specific instances. Turn the other cheek, walk the extra mile, give not only your coat, but your cloak also. Just as an aside, isn't it ironic that some in the evangelical community, who subscribe to a literal interpretation of the Bible, are the very ones who seem most committed to Second Amendment rights, I'm going to follow the teachings of Jesus, but I'm going to have my AK-47 in the closet. It just, it's kind of, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But what did Jesus mean by what he's saying? So if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. Why the right cheek? And this is Wink's word. These are Wink's words. A blow by the right fist in that right-handed world would land on the left cheek. To hit the right cheek with a fist would require using the left hand. And you couldn't use the left hand in the ancient world because it was considered unclean, because that's how people cleaned themselves after relieving themselves, the left hand. And even to gesture with the left hand would get you 10 days penance, according to the Qumran. The only way you could naturally strike the cheek with the right hand would be with the back of the hand. So what's happening here, if someone strikes you, turn the other cheek also. If someone strikes you, it's a backhand. This is what masters did to their slaves. It's what men and historically have done to women sometimes. It's what one group has done to another group, to humiliate. The whole point of the backhand is to humiliate, to subjugate, and to put that person in his or her place. It's a way to admonish those you consider inferior, unequal. The only normal response would be cowering submission. So part of the confusion surrounding these sayings arises from the failure to ask, who was Jesus' audience? Who was he talking to? And here's the key to understanding this, I think. He wasn't talking to the people doing the slapping. He wasn't talking to the people who were suing people. He wasn't talking to people who were requiring others to carry their stuff for a mile or more. He was talking to the people who were subjugated, the people who were being slapped, the people who were taken advantage of. And Jesus' listeners are not the ones who strike or initiate lawsuits, but the victims of the ones who do. So if someone asked you to go 1 mile, Jesus said you go a 2nd mile. So I asked Annie if she would work with me on this today. So this is pretty heady stuff. So I'll come over to the middle. This is pretty heady stuff. So I asked her if she'd be willing to punch me, and I said, "Oh yeah, I've been wanting to do that a long time." All right. So Annie is going to backhand me with her right hand. Not actually, but just what? So you're going to get this one, right? Yeah. Okay. That in the ancient world, that's what happened when a master would put a slave in his place. The backhand. you know. That's what the Romans did to the Jewish people in the occupation of Jerusalem. It's a way of subjugating and showing who's superior, who is in control, who has the power. So what would you expect me to do if Annie backhands me? Just cover myself or run away? Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? What did Jesus say do? He said, oh yeah? How about this one? So if the person doing the backhanding strikes you with his fist on the left cheek, stay with me now, this is a little complicated, I know, but that insinuated equality, right? Because that would be the fight between equals. But the backhand is not a fight between equals. It's an acknowledgement and a humiliation of the subjugation of the other person. Thank you, Annie. No, Annie didn't actually say she didn't want to hit me for years, but she said she'd take the opportunity to if it presented itself. No, but you see what I'm saying? So this nonviolent third way is not fight, it's not polite, it's active defiance. It's saying that I am your equal. You may strike me. You may strike me on the other cheek. I'm standing here. I'm your equal. You're not humiliating me. So, what about the other passages? If someone asks for your cloak, give him your coat also. Ask for your coat, give him your cloak also. This is another point of humiliation. When the Roman occupation, and all this is based on the Roman occupation of Jerusalem in the 1st century AD, when the Roman centurion could say to the Jewish passerby, hey, I like that, I'll have it. Give it to me. So what are your options? You give it to him, you try to run, then you get a spear in the back, which is not cool. What did Jesus say do? He said, if he asks for your cloak, your coat, give it to him, and then also give him your cloak, and then also give him your tunic, and then also give him your sandals. So Jesus is saying, strip down naked in the public square, basically, and embarrass this person who is asking you for such, because you are not humiliated. You are not to be ashamed. This person is asking of you something that is unjust, and you are defying the injustice of that system. The third example is if someone asks you to carry something for a mile, carry the second mile. You've heard that before, right? Go the second mile. What do we normally think about when someone says, go the second mile?
Above and beyond.
Above and beyond, yes. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I take care of things and do it just right. I'm gonna go above and beyond. And that's a great way of looking at it. It's not exactly what Jesus had in mind. In the Roman occupation of the 1st century Jerusalem, the Romans could require a Jewish passerby to carry their bag for a mile. But there was a stiff penalty if you carried it beyond 1 mile. That person could get in trouble. So what Jesus is saying is, carry that mile and then keep on carrying it. Because, this is a non-violent act of defiance. This is the way we respond to unjust powers in the world demanding so much of us in unjust ways. All right, I'm going to make this relevant, I promise. Who was one of the great masters of this nonviolent way of Jesus in the 20th century? Gandhi, yeah, absolutely. Who in the American context, in the U.S. context? Martin Luther King. Totally. He was brilliant at employing this tactic. In fact, I have a quotation from him from his sermon delivered at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church on Christmas in 1957. And he said this, and relating this to what I've just been talking about. To our most bitter opponents, we say, we shall match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We shall meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we shall continue to love you. We cannot, in all good conscience, obey your unjust laws, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. He's saying, we choose sides, Just as it's important to believe certain things or do certain things, it's also important to disbelieve or not do other things. Bomb our homes and threaten our children, we will still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities at the midnight hour and beat us and leave us half dead, and we shall still love you. But be ye assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer, and one day we shall win our freedom. But not only for ourselves, and this is the beautiful part of what he said, I think to me especially. Not only for ourselves, we shall so appeal to your heart and conscience that we shall win you in the process also. And our victory will be a double victory, because we break the cycle of violence and revenge by choosing the third nonviolent way of Jesus. We choose not to run. We choose not to fight, because what does fighting do? It's the Hatfields and McCoys. It carries on for generations, right? One of my favorite quotations by Alexandra Saley, the godmother of the Gardens of Forgiveness movement, who I work with, is that she asked the question, what is my responsibility for peace in the world today? And she says, my responsibility for peace in the world today is to become a better ancestor for my children. And how do I become a better ancestor for my children? Through forgiveness, I break the cycle of violence and revenge. I take care of my grudges and my business and my generation. I don't expect my children to fight my battles. That is revolutionary. So does that change your thinking about the idea of turn the other cheek? Does that inspire you? The gist of this whole message of Jesus is to love your enemies. That's a hard one to swallow. I don't know if y'all have had enemies before, but I have. After 9/11, I had a whole cadre of enemies. Last thing I want to do is love any of those people. The best thing I can do for my own heart and soul's sake is to love those people. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is a powerful thing to do. And it doesn't only free them, it frees us as well. Love your enemies breaks the chain of violence that Dr. King spoke so eloquently about. So the things about the third way, the nonviolent way, is to expose the injustice of a system and change it. So yes, let's give hungry people food. Let's do what we need to provide a charity for people to have what they need. But let's also work to change the system. Let's look at it systemically. What are the powers and principalities that are in place that we need to overturn in order to create a more just world for everyone? We challenge the status quo. That's the way it's always been done. The slave owner has always had his slaves, and it's okay for him to backslap the slaves because that shows them where they are. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. Another thing we do is we assert our own humanity and our own dignity. This breaks the cycle of humiliation. So if someone asked for in first century Jerusalem and Palestine, and a Roman centurion asked for my coat, and I give him my cloak also, and I basically keep going until he's really embarrassed, am I humiliating myself? No. It would be really embarrassing to stand naked in front of a bunch of people, but I'm asserting my dignity by saying, It is not right for you to take this from me, and I'm going to continue giving stuff to you because your request is so ridiculous. I'm going to show everyone how ridiculous it is. So that's some heavy stuff, heavy stuff. I think that this message is so important for us today, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to share this with you is because it influences my way of thinking about life in the world. And I think it's helpful to have some insights into these key biblical texts from so long ago and see them as, important and impactful for our way of living today. Gandhi took the nonviolent way of Jesus one little tiny step further. He talked about satyagraha, soul force, and it just kind of widened it. We see that movement in the civil rights in the U.S. in the 60s. We need to return to that again today, unfortunately. We see it powerfully in the overturning of apartheid in South Africa in 1994 when Nelson Mandela, the man who had been in prison for 27 years, stood as president. I mean, that's about as stark a contrast as you can imagine. He embodied all of these values in his life. When he left Robben Island, and Maria and I went to Robben Island a few years ago, and I can tell you it's not a happy place. He didn't even have a cot to sleep on, he had an old rug. When he left Robben Island after having been incarcerated there for 17 years, he was 10 years somewhere else before that, he said that, I decided then and there that if I carried my hatred with me out the gates, I'd still be in prison. So he decided to release that, to drop that burden of carrying that grudge. And when he was elected as president of South Africa, he insisted on a few people being there. One was his prison guard at Robben Island. Wow. I can't imagine that. Yeah. But there are examples for us to learn from, and he's one of them. And Bishop Tutu, of course, is another, and Dr. King is another. And we have so many beautiful examples of people doing this liberating, nonviolent work in the world today. And I think it's great for us to think about this. Maybe we should even do a study on the principles of nonviolent social change. There's some great curricula out there. I'd be happy and thrilled to do that with you if there's any interest. That's the nonviolent third way of Jesus. I hope that because we've gone through all of this now, you won't feel inundated by a bunch of esoteric knowledge or thoughts, but that when you think about turn the other cheek as you move forward, you'll remember its original context and the power that it has within it, and not just fleeing from something or being abused. The nonviolent third way of Jesus is a way for us to move forward. Okay, and now we go back to Mother Teresa. People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you're kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. Amen. Okay, so let's do our closing words. Those were our closing words, and now we extinguish the flame. Nick, would you be so kind? Thank you. Oh, I don't know if we have the extinguisher up. Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you. Excellent job. Excellent job. Let's say together, we extinguish the flame of this chalice. Let us follow the light of truth until we meet again. Okay, so what do you think? What are your comments, your questions, or your responses? Yes, Christine?
I keep thinking about the poor Ukrainian people. And, I was trying to think of what kind of cause for the invasion of the Russians was there, and I don't see anything there. And I'm thinking, what is their best response to an invasion? Is it to stand up and defend, or is it to let the Russians come in and take whatever they want? According to your thinking, it would be more the second. It would be kind of letting them have what they want, in exchange for the invasion. And in that case, I don't think that's correct.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really, really important point. The principles I talked about are for individuals in response to a perpetrator. It's different when it comes to communities or groups. I'm not sure what the right answers are, but I do hear you and I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Paul.
I think that passive resistance has been proven as an effective tactic.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sort of echoing what Christine thought. I can't help but think that some tyrants will not be shamed by that conduct.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of the concentration camps, the Gulag.
Yeah.
We're not talking several individuals or hundreds. We're talking millions of people enslaved and murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was, from what I understand, it was a big world conflict, like Dietrich
Bonhoeffer, yeah.
Because he said, "Shall we resist this Hitler, this tyrant? We'll just engage in passive resistance." So, but I understand your point that this is a standard for personal conduct and personal ethics.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, obviously, like if a band of people attacked our town, I mean, we would have to stand up to them. We wouldn't say, well, we'll just passively resist them. I think it's a different set of circumstances.
That's a really, really good point. Really good point. And, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of the theologian and pastor, was executed by the Nazis because of his plot to kill Hitler. So it wasn't that he was going to just kind of let Hitler have his day. It's a really complicated issue. Thank you for raising that, Christine. Yeah, John.
I didn't know whether maybe you had a few suggestions. All of us will have different ideas about some of the people today who might be filling or trying to fill the shoes of those like Martin Luther King, who stood for nonviolence and were successful in doing so.
Yeah. The person that I keep my eyes on, because I think he's one of our bright lights, is Rev Barber Barbara. He's North Carolinian too, by the way. And he stepped in to fill Dr. King's shoes because, in one part of his work, he's the chair of the Poor People's Campaign, which is one of the things that Dr. King started. And he has a lot to say about nonviolence and reconciliation, and some hard words too. For me, they're hard. Like, he says that if you can't look into the eyes of your bitter enemy and see the possibility of redemption, then you're not walking the path. I'm thinking, I don't want to look in the eyes of my bitter enemy and see the possibility, but I mean, he's right. He's right, isn't he? I mean, if I engage my enemy, individuals to individuals, I'm just going to perpetuate the cycle of violence. If I want to, Mandela said that the best way to conquer your enemies is to make them your friends. And that's yes.
This brings up the issue of how does one do this? I'm dealing with a situation right now which is similar to a situation I lived with for 35 years, and which is a person who doesn't like me and makes it very clear to all sorts of people. And I forgive her, but I don't like her, and I avoid her. And I don't think that that's probably the best way to deal with this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I put my forgiveness hat on here. To forgive her doesn't mean you let her off the hook for being a jerk. And when we encourage people to forgive, we don't encourage them to go back into abusive relationships, which in some measure that's how you could look at that possibly. So it sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing. You forgive her and you just keep your distance, you know, because her opinions about you have nothing to do with you. I mean, that's her stuff and her karma, you know, some people would say. Yeah. But to engage her and to, I mean, you've probably done that enough to realize it doesn't work and it's a waste of your time. So you have better things to do with your energy and time.
It's hard to accept that you can't do it.
It's hard to accept, yeah.
It seems to me in situations like that, other people know that she's a jerk too.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
as long as you maintain your integrity
Yeah,
and just, as you would say, turn the other cheek,
yeah,
they'll know who's
yeah.
the real jerk.
Yeah, 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 do good anyway, Mother Teresa says, yeah. Thank you. All right, well, I've really opened up a really heavy conversation this morning. Thank you for going there with me. I think it's really important. I don't have all the answers, obviously, but I love the conversations. And I love the conversation about, you know, the struggling folks in Ukraine this morning, you know, or later today there. And I don't really know what the answer is, but standing with them somehow seems right. We stand with individuals in light of the bullies of the world, and I think it's important to stand with communities too. Yeah. Okay, well, on a lighter note, how about let's have some coffee and continue our conversation?